Well, hello my friends and welcome to a brand new Impatient reading vlog. My name is Hannah and if you are new here, this year I have been reading Impatiently. It was one of my goals for the year to stop putting off the books that I really want to read for a rainy day or for some kind of future reason and to just get more impatient to pick up the book that I really want to read and read it now. So I have been vlogging my experience of doing this over the course of the year. They're all linked in a playlist down below. And every month I pick 4 books off my shelf that I am just excited to get to for whatever reason this month. And I've got some corkers, well, some potential corkers this month, starting with Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine, Evaristo. I cannot believe that I haven't read this book yet. I only read my first ever Evaristo this year. I read Mr. Loverman and loved it. I think I'm actually going to like this one even more from what I can tell about this one. It's a kind of their interconnected narratives following a girl, a woman and one other person at various different points. So I think it's 12 different characters. Now, you will know if you are a friend of this channel that sounds a little bit like a short story collection, and I don't do so well with those. However, I really think that this is about how they are connected, I think. And I loved the audiobook of Mr. Loverman so much, and I've heard really good things about this one. So I think I might like mixed media read this. I might read partly the physical copy and partly listen to it on audio. So that's one author that I've previously read and really liked. And another one is Benjamin Myers. So last year, one of my reading goals was to read more local to me authors, so that's more authors from the northeast of England. And in doing that, I discovered Benjamin Myers and I read Cuddy and I really, really liked it. And I have been a bit rubbish this year at continuing to read northeast authors. Now, I picked this up a while ago from one of my local indies, The Bound, and the bookseller did tell me afterwards, after I'd bought it, that because Ben Myers writes across so many different genres, that if I loved Cuddy, this might not have been the best pick to go to next, because I think this is quite a different vibe. But this is like set in a burning hot summer in the late 80s, and I think it is like working through some post-Falklands trauma in like a working class town, but it's got kind of like heavy summer vibes, like not like ooh nice light and uplifting summer, like oppressive heat misery vibes, which might sound awful to you but sounds great to me. So I'm looking forward to getting to that one. And then I have 2 authors who I haven't read before, and Elif Shafak is an author that I've really wanted to get to for a while. What was her Women's Prize, and was it Booker nominated as well? The Island of Missing Trees. I really wasn't that into the concept of that one, but this book sounds brilliant. So from what I can tell, this is a book that is covering the 10 minutes and 38 seconds after someone dies, where their consciousness is still sort of around and then dissipates. I think that's what it's about. I kind of don't really want to know too much more, but it sounds really interesting, and I've heard that she's a beautiful prose writer. So that is going to be book 3. And then book 4 is a newer release. That's kind of like, they're all pretty much backlisty from the last sort of 5 to 10 years. This only came out this year, and this is Mrs. S by Kay Patrick. Was it this year or was it last year? Is she lying directly to your face? She is. Came out in 2023. But my friend Farmer got me this because this is set in a boarding school, and it is set in the boarding school that is based on the boarding school that my best friend Farmer went to. And she was actually at school with Kay Patrick, played on the lacrosse team with them. So I'm reading this largely for some insight into what the hell it was like going to a boarding school, because that was not my experience of school. So and partly just, yeah, because of that like personal connection. However, I have had a number of people tell me that they think I will really like this who didn't know that it's based in the school that my best friend went to. So yeah, I think this is like, is it like vaguely creepy? It's giving me like maybe like Notes on a Scandal vibes. Maybe that's just because of the red, white and black. Who knows? So those are my 4 books. And where will I start? I've already got a couple of audiobooks out from the library, so I think I won't do Girl, Woman, Other just yet. I might go for the Elif Shafak first. Yeah, will we? Sure. Let's do that. So I'm gonna crack on and start reading this, and I will check in with you after I have done so. As always, there will probably be some dog walks and shit happening in between me coming to info dump about these books on you. And yeah, get yourself a cup of tea if you haven't got one already, and let's read some books. Greetings. I come to you freshly showered between the Wimbledon final and the Euros final. So let's just say I can't take 3 hours to talk to you about the books that I currently have to talk to you about. I haven't finished them all yet, but I do have some things to tell you about. It's been a couple of weeks since I filmed that intro, and I was off work. It's currently Sunday, in case you're not a sporty person and can't work that out from the fact that it's the Wimbledon men's final and the Euros final today. And yeah, I was off work for most of this week because we were going to a couple of gigs, one in London and one in Edinburgh. Which I thought would mean I'd have a lot of time for reading, and I've had a bit, but not loads. So I finished one, and I'm part way through a couple of others. So I began, as I think I said I would, with 10 minutes 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak, and I had a frustrating experience with this book, which you might empathise with, not about this particular book necessarily, but I started off loving this book so much and thinking like, oh my god, I'm gonna be so on board with it. And I remember my friend Evie commenting on a post I did about this book early on when I just started reading it, being like, oh yeah, like I loved another one of hers, but this one I just kind of like, I was a little bit disappointed by. And this was, remember, my first Elif Shafak. And what you might not know about me and my friend Evie is that we have identical taste in books. So I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, is this going to be like the day that Evie and I discovered that we had differing opinions about Atessa Moshfegh? Because that was a difficult day for me and my identity as a reader. Because ultimately, even when we disagree, which is very rare, I assume Evie is right anytime we disagree on books. Not that there is a right and wrong, there's obviously not a right and wrong. But yeah, so she said that she was a bit disappointed with it, and I was like, oh my god, are we going to diverge on Elif Shafak? Is she going to be the second author that we just don't agree on? But as the book went on, I was like, I get it. So let's talk about it. So this book is told in 3 parts. And the first section is inside the consciousness of a woman called Layla who has just died. And it is the 10 minutes and 38 seconds in which her she is legally dead, but her consciousness has sort of remained. So you're essentially like living through her like life flashing before her eyes, but it's like post-death. I don't think the medical side of it really matters, but she's essentially, you get 10 chapters, give or take, of like 1 minute after she died, 2 minutes after she died, 3 minutes after she died. And the writing in those, particularly the early ones, really evocative and beautiful. A lot to do with like olfactory memory, like a lot of like smells. So the first chapter, and this was when I was like, ooh, I think I'm gonna really like this book, because it was like almost like an out of body remembrance of like her birth. So you're not strictly remembering stuff as Layla. You're like revisiting moments. It's very like, you just kind of like have to go with it as like a metaphysical conceit, right? But it's like her birth, and it was fascinating to read and really interesting. And I was like, great, this is going to be cool. And I enjoyed the next few chapters that were like it. And interspersed in this first section, so the whole first section is those like these remembrances, and slowly you build up an idea of who this woman was who died. You kind of follow her through her life, and she grew up in do we know exactly where, but I think like in more like rural Turkey, and then she ended up moving to Istanbul, sort of against her parents' wishes, and she became she got trafficked while she was there, and sort of sold into sex work. She became a sex worker, and then she got killed, because yes, we also find out quite early on that she hasn't just died, she's been killed. And so you're building towards the kind of like the moment that happens through those chapters, and those are interspersed with stories of her friends and how she met her friends. So she's got like 5 main friends, and their stories were kind of interspersed throughout the first section. And throughout that first section, my interest did start to wane. And I think it was partly because structurally, I felt like the structure that she'd chosen to do had hamstrung her a little bit as an author, and that there weren't necessarily like 10 moments that we needed to hear about. And by the time we'd done like two minutes and then another friend's story, and then 2 minutes and then another friend's story, it started to feel quite overwrought and quite like quite conceited. Not conceited like the adjective conceited, but as in like it had quite a strong conceit to it, that I didn't necessarily like enjoy seeing. I felt like I was seeing like the bones of a building without like the finishing touches put on it. Not that it felt rough, but just it felt very like, here's the structure. And I don't know, it just wasn't gelling for me too much. And then the second part is sort of what happens to her body is in the sort of more the present moment, and you're following those friends that you met through the first section, and basically them trying to recover her body, and the services not wanting to give her body up, and it's sort of plot happens from there. And then a final section called The Soul, which is just a really short bit, which I won't get into because you probably can't talk about it without getting into spoiler territory, or at least I can't currently talk about it without getting into spoiler territory. And yeah, I felt like when the writing hit, it hit really beautifully. And I think there was a lot of love and complicated feelings that the author was putting in around Istanbul as a city, there were some really interesting like socio-political conversations that were coming through it, but the whole thing just felt quite heavy-handed when you zoomed out. And like even just like there was quite a lot of repetition through things that I just thought it felt quite laboured to me. It's the sort of writing that I think like will really work for some people, and it did work for me at the start when it was more of like a ephemeral like thought experiment sort of vibe, which is like more my lane. I was really enjoying it. And the closer we got to like rooting it and grounding it in like a slightly more conventional narrative and like a more kind of like plot's happening now, it lost me a little bit. And I think that's because also I found like I don't particularly like the way she writes dialogue. It felt quite unnatural, a lot of it, quite like overly, like, you know, when people like try to be like overly quippy with their dialogue, and I'm just like, people don't, like, we just don't talk like that. That's just not how humans talk. But anyway, so yeah, there were bits, and then like at the end of like, it felt like I could go through and double check if this is true, but it certainly felt to me like as a reader, at the end of any of the chapters that were like a specific chapter introducing one of the friends, that it would be like, was it at the end of that, or was it teeing up that chapter? Either way, it'd be like I'm trying to think of one of the names, Jamila, one of the five, and I found it a bit, and also like all of the friends had like names that just, it makes me feel like a bad person, but I was like a bit eye-rolly about it. So I wrote a note. Where were we? Yeah, so the five friends are Sabotage Sinan, Nostalgia Nalan, Jamila, Zainab 122, and Hollywood Humaira. And I was just like, I don't know, it just made me like roll my eyes a little bit. And anytime they were mentioned using those sort of like monikers, I was a bit like, they can just have names. But yeah, so yeah, I'm a little disappointed, but I do know that she is quite a divisive author. I remember when, is it The Island of Missing Trees was on like a load of prize lists in whichever year that was, like 2022, 2021. And I remember people having very mixed opinions about that book and how it worked. I sort of like concept liked this, particularly at the start. But then I saw it pulls away from being about, you think it's going to be about the crime, like her murder, and it pulls away from that in a way that I can see why she pulls away from it, but it's also like a bit of a frustrating experience. So like definitely for like, I stopped loving it after maybe about like 60 or 70 pages and became like a bit annoyed with it for the last third of the book, which is like a little bit of a shame, but we don't often miss on this Impatient vlog series, and you gotta miss every so often, right? So this was, if it sounds interesting to you, like give it a go. I think, like I say, if the writing works for you, you might like it, but then the writing really worked for me at the start and then really didn't work for me later on, so maybe that's nonsense advice. I don't know, just give it a go and know that. For me, it felt like there wasn't quite enough, that it had almost started with the structure and that there wasn't enough story to fill that structure. And so I felt like I was just like rattling around being like, where's the rest of the story? Because we've got this structure that's in place, but like not necessarily like the meat on the bones. Anyway, I'm like mixing all of my metaphors. 10 minutes 38 seconds in this strange world. There you go. I'm having a much better time though with Girl, Woman, Other, which I am this far through, although I'm kind of like mixed reading it. I'm like half listening to it on audio and half reading the physical copy, although no, not halves. I'm like 80% listening to it on audio and then picking it up every so often. Sometimes just so that I can see how characters' names are spelled and things like that. And because she does lay out her sentences in kind of an interesting way. There is not a lot of punctuation, which I hadn't realised at first, because obviously I started listening to it and then I was kind of going through being like, there's no punctuation here. And I don't know how I feel about that. It reminds me a little bit of the section of the bee sting that just like randomly didn't have any punctuation in it either, and I a bit don't know why, but I trust Bernadine. But this I'm really enjoying, and I'm really glad I'm really enjoying it, because I think I said at the start I loved Mr. Loverman, and I've been a little bit put off this because I thought it was going to feel like a short story collection, and at first it did feel like that. So we've got, how many chapters? There are 5 chapters in the book, and then each chapter is split into 3 distinct perspectives that are all sort of like related to each other. So there's 3 characters in each chapter: a girl, a woman, and another voice. Sometimes a woman, sometimes, I think, have they all been women that I've read so far? Yeah, so far I think they have been. But like another character. And at first I thought all of the chapters were going to be really distinct, but they do kind of link together, which is why I'm glad I'm mixed reading this, because I'm having to do not too much, but a little bit of flipping back to remember who was who. Because like characters from like the very first perspective will be called back like 9 perspectives later, and I'll be like, wait, which one was that? But on the whole, I think Bernadine Evaristo is a really brilliant sort of like portrait artist. As a writer, like she really gets under the skin of her characters and really presents them in like a very full way. So I'm not misremembering who people are because they're not distinct. They are very distinct, the characters in this book. It's just that when I've only audio processed something, I will just always struggle to remember characters' names. So I'm glad I've got a physical copy to help me out. But generally the audiobook is I'm getting along okay with it. And I'm really enjoying it. It's hard to say what the story is, because like I said, they are sort of interconnected short stories, but that are all interconnected. Good Lord. Yeah, they do all kind of like link in, but it's hard to see at the minute what or if the sort of overarching narrative is going to be. But what it's doing just an amazing job of is like essentially creating this patchwork narrative of life, particularly like life in London for people of colour. And it's giving me all of the rich and complicated characters that she had in Mr. Loverman, but like more of them. I think it's inevitable that you end up being like slightly more interested or slightly more drawn to certain characters than others, but I think she's she's covering so much ground in like relatively short. So what, I'm 290 pages in, the equivalent of 290 pages in, and that means I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm on my 9th character now, and so that's not a lot of pages per person, really, when you think about it. Like 9 characters out of 290 pages. So you're like, you know, you're getting what, 30 pages per character, but you're really feeling like I'm really feeling like I've got a lot of understanding, and I've taken a lot of understanding from how those characters have been presented. You're getting all sorts of really interesting interconnections, intersections of society. There's queer characters, there's aspects of colorism, there's sort of families that have like West African heritage, there's families that have Caribbean heritage. It's kind of, so you've got like a lot of there's just a lot going on, but it's really beautifully written. It can be very funny, as Mr. Loverman can be very funny, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So that's more than making up for the fact that I didn't so much enjoy the Elif Shafak. And then I'm about a quarter, maybe just over a quarter of the way through Mrs. S by Kay Patrick, and I am enjoying this. I'm enjoying it for the fact that Farmer has said that it is like a carbon copy of her school, like just in terms of like the grounds and the surroundings. It is absolutely like the school that she went to. So like I'm really enjoying sort of getting a kind of tour through the school. But this is following an unnamed, I think. Yeah, unnamed. An unnamed young woman. She's 22. She's Australian, and she's come to be a matron at this sort of boarding school up in the northwest of England. And Mrs. S is the headmaster's wife. And it's sort of about, yeah, this sort of young queer woman who's sort of she's very drawn to this woman, Mrs. S, but can't work out if she's misreading signs, or currently can't work out if she's misreading signs of Mrs. S kind of like showing any particular interest in her, or if she's just like being friendly and welcoming, and I feel like it's gonna go in a kind of dark direction. I am on the whole enjoying it. I am finding that there's not a huge amount of like I don't know if it's just been like my brain, but not a lot of like narrative markers in the book, in terms of like sometimes I'll be reading a bit and I'll have to like reread a page because I'm like, hang on, where are we? Or like, wait, who said what happened now? Because it doesn't have chapters. It's but it's got kind of like sections that are like between like 3 to 4 pages up to about, I think, like 15 or 16 pages. But it flows quite smoothly, and I think because it's told in first person, and it is very like, it's very much a like interior narrative, that sometimes I'm just like tripping up over like the where are we actually, what's going on, and she uses more short sentences than I love. And I think sometimes that's not helping me with feeling like a little bit, oh, where are we going? What's happening? Because the short sentences, I think, sometimes like encourage me to read a little faster than a like slow sentence that I kind of take my time over a little bit more. So I think sometimes I just get a little, and then I have to go back. But that feels like user error, if I'm honest. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. At the minute, it's not going to be like a favorite, but I'm enjoying it, and there's aspects of it that I like. I'm interested in like the characters and like where the story goes. But sometimes, yeah, just like a little bit in the writing style that's sort of. But then it might just also be that I'm multi-reading quite a lot. I've got quite a few books on the go at the minute, so that it could just be that like I've not given it enough time to. I think I've read it a little piecemeal, and it would benefit from like sitting and reading it for like an hour or two, rather than sort of reading 20 minutes and then putting it down, and then yeah. Which is not the book's fault. That's just like how my time has happened to shake out this week. So those are the books, and then I'm gonna start. Having just said I'm probably reading too much at the minute, I'm planning on starting The Perfect Golden Circle. I'm not gonna wait until I finish these two before I start on Perfect Golden Circle, because I kind of want to get to that soon too. So I'm going to leave you with some miscellaneous B-roll of the week that I've had off. So it started badly. So I had a meeting in York, for work, which was originally supposed to be in London, which is why I booked tickets to see The Killers in London on Monday night, because I was supposed to be working in London. And then I could just go to the gig afterwards, but the meeting got moved to York, which in some ways much closer to where I actually live, yay, but further away from where I needed to be in the evening, not yay. And I was on the train, and I should have had plenty of time to get down to London from York. If it's a 2-hour train journey, normally just over 2 hours, on the particular train that I was on. And I got to Peterborough, which is about halfway between York and London, and my train just stopped because there was a broken down train in front of us on the tracks, and we were stuck at Peterborough station for 2.5 hours, which basically meant that I went from having plenty of time to get into London, get to my hotel, get changed, get cute, sort all that out, to missing the first half of the gig and like having to like run through the tube, run across London, and like sweat my way. And then I got to the O2, which is where the gig was, with like my backpack. I didn't have like much with me. Got there with my backpack, and they were like, you can't bring that in here. So I'd got all the way in to pretty much like go into where the gig was, and they were like, no, you need to like leave your bag at the like cloakroom thing. I was like, okay, fine, I do understand why backpacks aren't allowed in concert venues. It would have been great if someone had stopped me before I'd got to this point, but no worries. I will go do that. Where do I have to go? So they're like, back out the building, round the corner. I'm like, cool, I've only missed half the gig. No worries, I'll just go do this. £10. £10 to leave one bag in this cloakroom. I was like, I hate the South. I know I'm from the South, but I hate it. I hate it so much. And it was £9.50 a pint in the O2, in case you're wondering. I didn't have a pint because I was like, well, that was my pint money, and I've spent it on not being able to bring my bag into the venue. So that was stressful, but we still ended up having like a nice morning the next day. We got the train back up to London on Tuesday. Had a day at home Tuesday, Wednesday. We've progressed with watching some Stranger Things because we'd put off that last half of the series for ages because it did the really long episodes, but we're breaking the back of that now. And then on Thursday we went up to Edinburgh, and we were there to see the National playing outside Edinburgh Castle. And that was amazing as a gig. And we went for, you're going to see B-roll definitely, of a vegan Italian restaurant that I found in Edinburgh, which is so fucking good. The next time you're in Edinburgh, if you're in Edinburgh and you at all are interested in having a plant-based meal, just One of my favourite desserts in the world is tiramisu, and I just don't often get to have it in a restaurant because it's almost never made vegan. So I had some tiramisu, and I had like just really delicious, like a vegan carbonara, and these like pizza ball things that were like spicy and bready, and I had a wonderful time. And it was really, really good food. It was really good food. And then there'll probably be some other like random bits and bobs of Edinburgh. And then on the way home from Edinburgh, we stopped off in Bamburgh, which is in sort of Northumberland, about halfway between where I live on the northeast coast of England and Edinburgh. And so we had a lovely walk along the beach. And then we came home and hugged our dog, who's there. Hey, baby. And so yeah, that's what you're going to be seeing on the B-roll coming up, and I'll check in with you as and when I finish things. I'm off to watch the football. I mean, should we do a guessy game? I was talking about this with my friend. If you skip this, if you don't give a shit about football. I think if it goes to extra time, England will win. But I don't think we'll win it in normal time. But I think Spain could. Let's see if I'm right, shall we? Finished another book. Finished Girl, Woman, Other. Really liked it. Did really like it. Didn't like it as much as Mr. Loverman. And it's interesting. I had a brief conversation with which one of you? Jill, on Instagram, about this being a really good example, Girl, Woman, Other and Mr. Loverman, of Jill called it like the difference between best and favourite. Like, I can see why this book was nominated for the Booker where Mr. Loverman wasn't. But I preferred Mr. Loverman. So like,
there was so much to admire in here, and the scope of it, the complexity of how she has imagined all of these intersecting lives was brilliant. Towards the end, I really liked that we went even further back in the generations than I thought we were gonna go through. But for me, we just went, it wasn't quite hitting a sweet spot of interconnectedness for me personally. So they were all vaguely connected, and then it felt like towards the end they got really connected, but only like towards the latter half, and it didn't quite come together for me. I just a little bit felt like the balance was off. I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was an excellent book. But I think, and again, this is just total personal preference, and I think it is the part of my brain that doesn't do so well with short stories. I felt like there was maybe like one or two too many people that we were following in this, and I felt like by the end I could see what the overall sort of shape of it was, but I felt like some of the characters contributed significantly more to that shape than others did, and we maybe didn't need all of them. Whereas I think with Mr. Loverman, because it just had a sharper focus, I preferred it. It was more my kind of thing. I think I always end up really liking and respecting these big cast numbers that people write, but I find that they don't often hit me emotionally in the same way. That being said, I mean, I feel like I've sounded more negative there than I feel about this. I can't tell you how much I really think this is excellent. It's so good. It just it wasn't quite magical for me. But that is obviously, as all things are, entirely subjective, and really very much to do with like what I look for and like in a book. And I think these big sweeping sort of things I like on paper a lot more than I appreciate them a lot more than I love them, if that makes sense. But I really liked the sensitivity and awareness and sort of neutrality with which Bernadine Evaristo sort of observes her characters and brings them to life. I feel like she looks really honestly at her characters, and this is what I really liked in Mr. Loverman and this one too. She looks really honestly at them and doesn't sort of make apologies for them, but is also, there was real affection for all of the characters here, even ones where I think a slightly more heavy-handed author might have judged some of these characters more harshly than I think Bernadine Evaristo does. I think there's something in this book about capturing the way our conversations about identity shift through generations, and how jarring that can be for intergenerational, even really well-meaning intergenerational kind of conversations, because it's very easy for very young people who've grown up in different circumstances to older. I mean, I'm talking potentially maybe more about the queer community here, but there's so much. The experience of growing up queer in Britain, for example, was so vastly different for someone who's currently in their 60s or 70s than someone who's currently in their early 20s. That's not to say that anyone has a completely easy ride, obviously, but I think she captures those sorts of conversations between the characters and through the characters, and the real kind of difficulty, but also the real value and necessity of us trying to understand across generations, I think was really brilliantly done in the book. And I mean, she's just a beautiful writer. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I feel like Girl, Woman, Other and Mr. Loverman are the ones that everyone talks about for Bernadine Evaristo. And obviously I've read both of those this year. Actually read both of those like in the last couple of months. And I've really enjoyed both of them. So if you've read others on her backlist, let me know where I should head to next, because she's going on my list of authors that I'm very interested in sort of like completing the backlist of over time. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's Friday. I feel like I'm not very articulate, but then I feel like I'm never very articulate. But it is Friday night, currently 7 p.m. on a Friday night, and I've just had the longest fucking week. I don't have tons and tons and tons of meetings for work, but what this week has been 3.5 days pretty much solidly meeting, talking. And for an introverted person, that is just so much talking and people. But you know what, guys? It's Newcastle Pride tomorrow. So there is going to be more people. There's going to be more people and there's going to be more talking because I got a rally. But my partner is currently away. So the good news is that I can have a lovely introverted evening reading the remainder of my books, and try and conserve some energy to go have a lovely little march tomorrow. I've not got very much left of Mrs. S, and I'm well over halfway through the Perfect Golden Circle, so I don't know if I will see you once more or twice more, but either way, there'll probably be some B-roll of Pride coming up. Welcome to the floor of another room. I'm not sure you've seen this particular floor, so welcome. I finished books. I'm a little croaky. My life is meetings at the minute. Like, my job is just like, it's not normally like this, but it is just wall to wall to wall to wall to wall meetings every day for like 2 weeks. And so I'm a little talked out, and I haven't planned what I'm going to say about these books. Hi, baby, you okay? Yeah, you go up there, Lewin up. Yeah. You can get up there. He needs... This is how pampered my dog is. That the pillows have to be exactly right, or he won't go up. Good boy, yeah, Lewin up. You're going to make me feel bad and lie on the floor, aren't you? Lewin up. Good boy, go on. Don't make me get up.
The emotional manipulation of this dog. Okay, you happy there? Okay, good boy. But I have finished them both. But I haven't planned what I'm gonna say. Not that I like ever fully like write out a long form review, but I normally at least make some notes. So let's start with Mrs. S, which I enjoyed, and I enjoyed more than I thought I was going to enjoy it at the last time we checked in. Or I checked in. I guess you probably didn't check in with me, unless you did, in which case, the last time we checked in. I do think I was right in that it benefited from a more intensive reading experience than I think I was giving it in the first portion of my reading. You're gonna suckle your pillow because evil ma'am won't sort your pillows out. I will not be manipulated by an animal. I will not. Okay. This is what he does to self-regulate. I don't know if I've shown you him suckling before, but this is what he does to calm down and process his feelings. It's very relatable. So yeah, I ended up enjoying it. I can't remember how much I told you about this book, but a very quick recap. We are following a young Australian protagonist who is has just started working as a house mistress at a boarding school in England. It is about her infatuation, possible affair with the headmaster's wife, Mrs. S. And what did we think of this book? Sometimes I found the interior, it's so in the protagonist's head. And sometimes I found that really captivating and really engaging. And sometimes I was like clamoring for more external placement, like more description of just like what else was going on. Like I wanted to get out of this character's head at regular moments. But I think that's probably because it's quite a claustrophobic and intense period of time that the book is covering. And so I think it's probably a sign that the writing was really effective, that I felt like that. It just didn't always lead to like the most enjoyable reading experience, if you know what I mean. But I do think Kay Patrick's a really interesting writer. I think thematically there was some really interesting like power dynamics and the way those are explored in the book. The way characters are named, I mean, Mrs. S is obviously called Mrs. S. We never know what our protagonist's name is. They make friends with another queer woman who works at the school, who is just called the house mistress. The head teacher is just called the head teacher, or Mr. S. The girls are all referred to collectively as the girls. There's no individual like identities outside. So this is what I mean about that sort of like it's so strongly filtered through this one consciousness that like sometimes I just felt like that was like a lot, and it took me quite a while to settle into it. I do think that like the actual story isn't the most like, it's not the most complicated, and it was interesting because I would have loved a perspective from Mrs. S in this, which would have made this book entirely different and entirely like not what this is. So I think it's an unfair ask, but I found that I was drawn to Mrs. S the way that the character was drawn to Mrs. S, which shows again that the writing was really strong in that sense. But I also found it a little dissatisfying that we never got to know her, and we never got to see Mrs. S not through the eyes of the protagonist. And that I found a frustrating experience. There were some really interesting explorations of gender identity in the book. So the protagonist was assigned female at birth, but as I said, is non-binary and wears a binder and has a sort of not a difficult relationship, but there's a conversation that they have with Mrs. S that is about sort of Mrs. S is kind of, because she's that bit older, and she is asking, well, like, why do you wear it? Is it because you want to be more manly? And the protagonist ends up saying, yeah, just sort of because they don't think that they can explain it in any other way, even though that's not genuinely like how they feel about it. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a promising debut. Let me just have a quick flick through to see if there was anything I underlined or made a note of that I particularly need to talk to you about. Oh yeah, did I talk about the short sentences? I think this was also what I found a little jarring at the start. So this is an example of where the rhythm of the prose didn't work for me. So basically the protagonist has just spotted Mrs. S across essentially like the school grounds, and it's a really hot day. Muscle, water. That day is a parallel universe set afloat upon my body, no longer in existence. I'm slightly exaggerating the pauses just so you can see where the sentences are ending. No longer in existence. She has created a lack so effortlessly. Is it knowingly or unknowingly done? I try to shift under her gaze in the corridor. She doesn't bend, only nods her head, walking past. The weather has not changed. There is lethargy, movement reduced, laughter dissolved into sighs. I am grateful for the melodrama. The lawns are permanently busy. Bikinis are not permitted, so instead the girls tuck their shirts in and up, socks and shoes removed. Like, I don't know if it's such a subjective thing, but I found like we move between imagery quite a bit, and I was just sometimes just like clamoring for a nice long sentence. And this is someone who has been like traumatized this year by reading a number of books with just insufferably long sentences. So maybe it's just like by contrast with some of the other books that I've read, this felt like a lot of short sentences. And it wasn't like the whole book's not written like that, but there are a number of bits that are like that. But like thematically, I enjoyed it. I thought the characters were interesting. I thought it explored interesting kind of dynamics. It felt a little more like a situation than a story, if I'm being like 100% honest. But yeah, I liked it, and I'll definitely read anything else that Kay Patrick puts out. So yeah, that was that one. And then I've also read The Perfect Golden Circle by Benjamin Myers. And so this is, I guess, historical. It's set in the late 80s, and it's so rude that probably does make it historical fiction now. And it's set in this really blisteringly hot summer in 1989, and we are following two men who are sort of social misfits living in rural England in the southwest. And one of them, Calvert, is a former special forces soldier who fought in the Falklands and in a number of other British overseas misadventures, and is dealing with his sort of trauma for that. He's a bit of a prepper. He's a little bit of a not a conspiracy theorist, but I think he's a really good example of a man who has seen too much of the world, and is sort of, and it has in lots of ways affected his faith, I think, in big social systems. This is my psychoanalysis of this character. And then there's Redbone, who is a sort of like punk kind of guy, very anti-establishment, just sort of floating on the breeze, just sort of living a bit outside the norms of society. And the two of them are embarking over the course of the book on creating a series of increasingly complex crop circles across various fields in the Southwest, and each chapter is following a different weekend where they are doing a crop circle. And I was really interested in that. I remember, like, I don't know, I was like a little bit interested in crop circles when I was younger, I think because of Signs. Do you remember that film with Joaquin Phoenix? I really liked that film. I haven't seen it in a very long time. Anyway, yeah, and I was interested in that, and I was interested in why they are doing it, and the two men they're not pranksters. They're not doing it to sort of have people think that there's like alien life, although that is sort of what people end up assuming is forming these crop circles. But they're doing it sort of for the pure beauty of the thing, for the craftsmanship that goes into it, for the planning and the feeling like you're leaving a mark on the world, even though, and the characters talk about this, there are only marks that are left fleetingly on the world, really, because they're not obviously, once the wheat or barley or whatever grain they've kind of done these crop circles in, once that's harvested, obviously you're not going to see it anymore. But I did not know that it seemed to imply in this that when you do the crop circles, if you do them right, you're just bending, like gently bending the crop, so you're not actually like you're not ruining it, so that it's still like harvestable, so that you're not actually, I mean, I was like, I'm not a details person, so a different person would have Googled more about that and would be able to give you an update, but that ain't me. And yeah, I enjoyed this. It is another one though that is a little, it is like every chapter is a crop circle, and you understand more about the characters through their conversations as things happen, and as they increasingly feel a sense of responsibility or pressure to do these increasingly more complex shapes. And I, on the whole, found the writing enjoyable. I found the characters interesting, but it was another one that felt a little bit situation over story in a way. I thought it was sort of quite tender at points. I have been looking for a book that, since I read and loved Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan a few years ago, I've been looking for a book that really explores like adult male friendship, because I don't think there are a lot of books about that, particularly sort of working class adult friendships that are positive and enriching and rewarding. I don't think it's something that is written about very often, and I'm pleased that this book exists for the fact that it does that. They have this sort of relationship that they're clearly very fond of each other, but they also hold each other at a little bit of a distance. They've got that sort of professionalism because they're really more like fellow artists in it, but that they sort of slowly start to kind of become a little bit more vulnerable with each other over the course of the book. And yeah, I liked it. It's not a patch on Cuddy for me. So I loved Cuddy by Benjamin Myers. And this for me didn't quite hit those heights. It is a book that's very different, and I have heard this, that Benjamin Myers, all of his books are very different, like tonally, and almost like he writes across a number of different genres. Cuddy was definitely like a more experimental book. This is more of a sort of classic character study piece of literary fiction. I think he clearly had a huge amount of fun coming up with English place names. So each of the chapter titles is the name of the crop circle as they name it. So it's like the place name followed by like normally like the shape of the crop circle. So here are just a couple of them. Where are we? The long barrow whale, the Bracklebreed dodman, the high basset butter barrel whirlpool, the cuckoo spittle thought bubble, the throstle henge asteroid necklace, and the honeycomb double helix. The honeycomb double helix is one that they are building towards. That's like the biggie that they're building towards for the entire book. And I think thematically you're exploring sort of rural life, changing rural life, and the people that are left on the outside of progress often, and sometimes like those communities that can feel the most left behind by social progress, and that was interesting. It's set during a heat wave, and there are lots of references to that. I found the obvious sort of nudge nudge wink wink moments when we're talking about climate change, like they're having conversations about, oh, apparently it's only going to get worse, or oh yeah, apparently it's because we've all been like driving our cars too much, or like spraying too many aerosols or whatever. And there is one point where one of the characters says, oh, well, once that becomes common knowledge, people will stop doing it because they're not stupid. And obviously that isn't what's happened. And so like there were just a few moments like that where I was like, oh, it felt a bit laboured and a bit heavy-handed, and I would have maybe liked a little more subtlety in how that was managed. But sometimes I found my appreciation for his prose a little more hit and miss than I did with Cuddy. There were moments where I thought it was just really stunningly beautiful, and some moments where it felt a little overwrought, and a bit too much, a bit sort of, yeah, just a bit too much. And some of the sentences I was like, I wish you'd gone with like a slightly more common synonym than that succession of like sort of thesaurus-y type words. But I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. It's a good summer read if you're looking for just a kind of like slow, sort of character-y, kind of slice of life rural book set in the summer, then this might be what you want. This also has a lot of summery vibes, so I've picked seasonally appropriate books at least, and yeah, so on the whole probably not the most successful impatient reading vlog I have had, but definitely like books I'm glad I've read. And Benjamin Myers I am going to persevere with in a few different formats. I think I want to get Gallows Pole by him. I think I might prefer something a bit darker from him. And K. Patrick and Bernadine, well, K. Patrick I will read again. Bernadine, Evaristo, I definitely will be reading more of. I think Girl, Woman, Other is my favourite of the four that I've read here. And Elif Shafak, I am jury's out on whether I think she's an author that could be for me in a different book, because to be honest, from my brief look at the other books that she's written, I feel like this was the one that would have been most up my street. So if I didn't really like this one, I'm not sure I would like others. But if you have watched my channel for a little while and you have a kind of gauge on what I like and don't like, even though I'm like painfully inconsistent, and sorry about that, but and you've read some more Elif Shafak titles and you think I might like those. Oh, there was, what did Evie say? What did Evie say? Honor? Honor, maybe? I might talk to Evie and see what Honor's like, because maybe that one. But definitely, like, 10 minutes and 38 seconds in This Strange World was my least favourite. Then probably, like, tied for these two, and then Girl, Woman, Other just edging it, but still not preferring Girl, Woman, Other to Mr. Loverman. So there we go. That's how the books have been. And I will catch you soon for another one. I mean, I've got about a week and a half before I pick my August books, and I was just looking at my shelves before, trying to figure out what might be on there, and I think my owned books are not calling to me so much at the moment, and it might be a library edition, or I desperately don't want to be, but she might get sucked into the booker. She might. I'll see. If I look at the books that are on the Booker long list and I genuinely think I'm more drawn to reading those than anything on my shelf, then maybe the August edition will be a bookery edition. Who the hell knows? But for now, thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you've had a good July. Let me know what you've been reading. What books are you itching to get to in August? Are you planning on reading the Booker long list, short list? Do you not give a shit? Any of those is fine. And yeah, if you want to give this a little thumbs up, that would be really appreciated. And subscribe to my channel if you're still here. If you've made it to the end of a video and I've not kind of pissed you off yet, then you should probably subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you soon. Bye.